Why your brain takes sides, the psychology of black and white thinking. Why is it so difficult to be objective? Why do we so quickly take sides? Why can two intelligent people look at exactly the same evidence and come to completely different conclusions? Whether it is politics, education, relationships, social issues, or even something as simple as an argument online, human beings seem naturally drawn towards putting things into categories, right or wrong, good or bad, us or them. But perhaps one of the reasons this happens is that objective thinking is not really our brain's default setting. Human beings are remarkably capable thinkers, but psychologists have sometimes described us as cognitive misers. What this means is that we tend to conserve mental effort. Our cognitive resources are limited, so wherever possible, the brain relies on shortcuts, familiar explanations, and quick judgments rather than carefully analyzing every piece of information it encounters. That helps explain why we so easily end up thinking in terms of sides. Reality is usually much messier than that, but ambiguity creates work. If I can put something into a category and say, I know what side of this I'm on, I no longer have to continually reconsider every new piece of information. There is an interesting biological backdrop to this as well. The human brain represents only around 2% of an adult's body weight, yet it accounts for approximately 20% of the body's resting energy consumption. In other words, it is an extraordinarily metabolically demanding organ. But there is an important qualification here. It would be misleading to say that every time you engage in difficult critical thinking, your brain suddenly starts burning enormous numbers of additional calories. Most of the brain's energy consumption is already occurring while the brain is in its normal active state. Demanding cognitive tasks generally produce relatively modest changes in total brain energy consumption. So the idea that we are cognitive misers shouldn't simply be understood as thinking burns too many calories so the brain avoids it. It is more complicated than that. We have limited attention, limited working memory, limited processing capacity. So efficient mental shortcuts are extremely useful. Psychologists often refer to these shortcuts as heuristics. And heuristics are not necessarily bad. In fact, we could probably not function without them. Imagine having to consciously analyze every possible interpretation of every decision you make throughout the day. What should I eat? Which route should I take? What does that person's facial expression mean? Should I trust this information? Is this chair safe to sit on? If every decision required deep analysis, you probably wouldn't get out of the house. The problem arises when a shortcut replaces the deeper thinking that the situation actually requires. This connects with what psychologists call dual process theories of thinking. There are different versions of these theories, but they commonly distinguish between two broad kinds of cognitive processing. One is relatively fast, automatic, and intuitive. The other is slower, more deliberate, and reflective. You can immediately see why black and white thinking is attractive to fast thinking. They are wrong, we are right. That is cognitively easy. Compare that with, some of their argument appears to be correct. Some of ours might be wrong. The evidence isn't conclusive. It might depend on the circumstances, and I might have to change my position if better evidence appears. That takes considerably more intellectual work. And there is another complication. We don't simply process information. We sometimes attach our identity to it. Once an opinion becomes part of who I am, rather than simply something I currently believe, changing my mind becomes psychologically much more difficult. Research into motivated reasoning and identity-protective reasoning explores how people's desires, commitments, and group identities can affect the way they interpret information. And this might help explain why arguments about things like politics, religion, education, parenting, or social issues can feel completely different from arguing about whether Paris is the capital of France. One is primarily a question of fact. The other may be connected to your values, your social group, and your conception of yourself. If somebody challenges the first, they are challenging a piece of information. If somebody challenges the second, it can feel as though they are challenging you. This also connects with something called myside bias. Myside bias is our tendency to generate and evaluate arguments in ways that favor positions we already hold. And there is something quite uncomfortable about the research in this area. Being intelligent or highly educated does not necessarily remove these biases. In other words, being clever doesn't automatically make you objective. Sometimes being clever simply makes you better at constructing arguments for what you already believe. You become a better lawyer for your own position, but not necessarily a better judge of the evidence. So what can we actually do about this? The goal probably shouldn't be to become perfectly objective. That may be impossible. Instead, the goal is to develop habits that make us less vulnerable to our own biases. One particularly useful idea is something called actively open-minded thinking. This means deliberately considering alternative positions, paying attention to evidence that contradicts what you currently believe, avoiding conclusions when there isn't enough evidence, and being willing to revise your beliefs when better information becomes available. That means critical thinking isn't simply asking, "Can I find evidence supporting my argument?" A much more powerful question is, "What evidence would convince me that I'm wrong?" You can also deliberately ask yourself, "What is the strongest argument against my position? What part of the opposing argument might actually be correct? Am I judging this evidence differently because I like the conclusion? What information am I missing? How confident should I really be?" And perhaps one of the most powerful habits we can develop is learning to say, "I don't know yet," because sometimes uncertainty is the most rational position. We often mistake confidence for intelligence. Someone who sounds completely certain can appear knowledgeable, but genuinely critical thinkers are often comfortable saying something very different. Based on the evidence I've seen, I currently lean this way, but I could be wrong. That small shift changes everything. It moves us away from thinking like advocates whose job is to win an argument, and towards thinking like investigators whose job is to work out what is most likely to be true. And perhaps that is one of the central challenges of critical thinking. Our brains are extremely good at producing answers. The harder skill is learning when not to trust the first answer they give us.